We do have some news to get to start the afternoon. Some news on the Julian Assange front, which we always like to cover whenever it breaks. So, Russell, why don't we get into that?
All right. So Stella tweeted out an article. UK courts close in on cover up of gross misconduct in Starmer's handling of Assange case. So while everybody's looking at grooming gangs, which whatever you think about Starmer, we don't think much about him, doesn't really seem to have been something that he was responsible for. Here's something he is responsible for. I hope Elon is going to tweet about this as much as he has about 10-year-old groomer gang
Well, you'd think he would.
cases.
Free speech champion and all that he
Free
is.
speech champion that he is, I'm sure he's going to get right on this. A judge threatens to break UK's wall of secrecy around Assange's persecution. After 9 years of legal battles, a British judge has finally challenged the wall of secrecy erected by British and Swedish authorities around the legal abuse of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Judge Foss, sitting at the London First Tier Tribunal, has ruled that the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS, must explain how it came to destroy key files that would have shed light on why it pursued Assange for 14 years. The CPS appears to have done so in breach of its own procedures. A lot of that going around. Assange was finally released from Belmarsh High Security Prison last year in a plea deal after Washington had spent years seeking his extradition for publishing documents revealing U.S. and U.K. war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. The CPS files relate to lengthy correspondence between the UK and Sweden over a preliminary investigation into rape allegations in Sweden that predate the U.S. extradition case. A few CPS emails from that time were not destroyed and have been released under Freedom of Information rules. They show that it was the UK authorities pushing reluctant Sweden prosecutors to pursue the case against Assange. Eventually, Swedish prosecutors dropped the case after running it into the ground. In other words, the few documents that have come to light showed that it was the CPS, led at that time by Keir Starmer, later knighted, and now Britain's Prime Minister, that waged what appears to have been a campaign of political persecution against Assange rather than one based on proper legal considerations. It is not just Britain concealing documents relating to Assange. Take that down. The U.S., Swedish, and Australian authorities have also put up what Stefania Morizzi, an Italian journalist who has been doggedly pursuing the FOIA requests, has called a wall of darkness. There are good grounds for believing that all four governments have coordinated their moves to cover up what would amount to legal abuses in the Assange case. Starmer headed the CPS when many highly suspect decisions regarding Assange were made. If the documents truly have been destroyed, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to ever know how directly he was involved in those decisions. Extraordinarily and conveniently for both the UK and Sweden, it emerged during legal hearings in early 2023 that prosecutors in Stockholm claimed to have destroyed the very same correspondence deleted by the CPS. Okay, so that's clearly criminal coordination. That's a criminal conspiracy. See, this is part of why people have lost all faith in institutions. Because no one's going to jail for this, right? You should go to jail for it. If me and Keaton could be proven to have destroyed government records that by law are supposed to be preserved and we coordinated our destruction, we'd go to jail, right? These people won't go to jail. They get knighted.
Of
It used
course.
to be to get knighted, you had to find the Holy Grail. Now what do you have to do? Railroad journalists to get a knightship now? The new ruling by Judge Foss will require the CPS to explain how and why it destroyed the documents, and provide them unless it can demonstrate that there is no way they can ever be retrieved. Failure to do so by February 21st will be treated as contempt of court. The UK and the US have similarly sought to stonewall separate FOIA requests from Maurizi concerning their lengthy correspondence, while Washington sought to extradite Assange on espionage charges for revealing their war crimes. The British judiciary approved locking Assange up for years while the extradition case dragged on, despite United Nations legal experts ruling that Assange was being arbitrarily detained, and the UN's expert on torture, Niles Meltzer, finding that Assange was being subjected to prolonged psychological torture that posed a threat to his life. Now, this is not the first story like this to break. This is back in June 2023. This is before Starmer became prime minister. And already there was reporting, of course, not in the corporate media, but independent outlets were already reporting U.S. records show Starmer met with AG Eric Holder and a host of American and British national security officials in Washington in 2011 when he was in charge of Julian Assange's proposed extradition to Sweden. So just briefly, some of the main points in this article. Starmer was in Washington 3 times while in charge of Assange's proposed extradition to Sweden. Starmer led a 5-person British delegation that met with Holder for 45 minutes in Washington in November 2011. Delegation included the UK liaison prosecutor to the US who dealt with extradition. Meeting was also attended by head of U.S. Department of Justice's National Security Division. CPS refuses to clarify to declassified destruction of the Washington documents is routine procedure, whether it is. The CPS, England and Wales's public prosecutor, has deleted all records of its former head Keir Starmer's trips to the U.S. It can be revealed. Starmer served as Director of Public Prosecutions, DPP, from 2008 to 13, a period when the body was overseeing Julian Assange's proposed extradition to Sweden to face questioning over sexual assault allegations. While DPP Starmer made trips to Washington in 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2013 at a cost to the British taxpayer of £21,603. It was his most frequent foreign destination while in post. Max Hill, the current DPP, has made just 1 trip to Washington during his 5-year tenure. During Starmer's time in post, the CPS was marred by irregularities surrounding the case of the WikiLeaks founder. The organization has admitted to destroying key emails related to the Assange case, mostly covering the period when Starmer was in charge, while the CPS lawyer overseeing the case advised the Swedes in 2010 or 2011 not to visit London to interview Assange. An interview at that time could have prevented the long-running embassy standoff. Okay, so you literally had Starmer's office telling the Swedish prosecutors not to come interview the suspect and only to focus on pursuing the case and extraditing Assange. And clearly there has been a coordinated effort around this, and it really becomes clear when you look at both of these stories together that all of these countries are coordinating to destroy evidence. Now, is Elon going to tweet about this? Every day I look at social media, there's more about labor perverts, right? I would love to hear something about this, because it sounds like with this, you've got really solid evidence on Starmer himself.
Yeah. Well, definitely he is obviously, pardon me, personally implicated in this. We always knew that the charges against him were political. To me, the big revelation here is that a judge is going to look into this, and that we actually might get more answers into who specifically knew what and when. And yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, this was a criminal conspiracy against a journalist for the crime of doing journalism.
Right.
That was pretty obvious from day one. And we always kind of assumed that we would, take that knowledge with us wherever we go, but that, even after the plea deal was struck and he was thankfully freed last year, we didn't really expect to have any real, accountability for what was done to him. But I certainly hope there is, and this is certainly the first step towards that, which is a good sign. It's a good sign that nature is healing in some ways, at least.
In some ways it is. In some ways it is. Remember, this is something that transpired across multiple administrations. I think you can really see the difference between the Obama and Trump administrations and the way they handled this. It sounds like the Obama administration didn't want to be held responsible for persecuting a journalist, so they collaborated to try to get Sweden to bring him up on these what looked like bogus assault charges. Trump just tried to have him whacked. Pompeo tried to whack Assange, so he was not any better. Will Trump come in and issue a full pardon? I don't think so. He wouldn't do it the first time. He's not going to do it this time.
I would not expect that, but like I said, I do think
is Kash Patel going to release the files from this?
Well, that's another question. Yeah, no, I mean, look, this is a step one. Obviously, I think Julian Assange should sue the governments of both the UK and the US. I think there's a great case to be made.
And Sweden. Fuck Sweden.
And Sweden, too. I think he should sue everybody at some point, but, take it step by step. And this is certainly a good first step in that direction, because not only should he be pardoned because he committed no crime ever, he shouldn't have had to take a plea deal. We're obviously glad he did and glad he's free. That's obviously first priority, right? But yeah, I mean, he should pursue some sort of payback. I mean, they tortured this guy for 5 years in prison, and that was after detaining him wrongfully on what were clearly bogus, politically trumped up charges from day one. There was never any case against him at all, ever, on any fronts. Not on the Espionage Act charges and not on these sexual assault charges, which were pretty obviously drummed up for political purposes since they were brought. I mean, that was pretty obvious.
Well, and look at the chilling effect this has had on journalism, because WikiLeaks was pointing to a future where you can't keep government secrets anymore. When was the last time you saw that kind of an info dump from any outlet?
Exactly. So it definitely hurt the public as well. It wasn't just a crusade against Assange and against WikiLeaks, but as intended, it ended up having the effect of depriving the public of very necessary information, the amount of which we'll never know what we missed out on because of that. So yeah, there's definitely a case against these people. There should definitely be payback through the legal system where the case is open and shut. And so this is step one. We hope one of many.
Please clap.